There is something about the time after Thanksgiving that feels strange. We go from gratitude around the table to Black Friday madness in just a matter of hours. Some of us barely finish the leftovers before we are already stressed about football or lights, gifts, travel, or whether the family Christmas picture looks awful or not, if someone is looking or has eyes closed. And so Advent arrives right in the middle of that mess, in the midst of that bumpy ride of emotions. And Advent whispers, slow down, stop, pay attention, watch well. Both of our readings from Mary with the angel in Luke, one of the most traditional readings from the season, and Jesus teaching about the watchfulness in Matthew, still in the lectionary, but a less traditional reading, sounds different on the surface, but they may be revealing the same lesson, the same direction. They both suggest that hope begins when we stop moving long enough to see, notice, be present in what God is actually doing. And that in itself may be harder than we think, harder than we want to admit. And so today I want to explore these two stories with you. When the angel Gabriel came to Mary, she wasn't in a prayer retreat, she wasn't on a mountain, she wasn't fasting. She was probably doing something painfully normal, like cooking, cleaning, folding clothing, getting Whopper, finishing chores, etc. The kind of moment where you don't expect God to show up at all. It is interesting that Scripture doesn't describe, the Scripture doesn't describe Mary as scared or frightened by the presence of the angel. Our reading actually says that she was perplexed. That's Luke 1:29. You can also say that she was confused, not because of the presence of the angel, but because of what he said. And while the angel did say in Luke 1:30, do not be afraid, this invitation wasn't about being terrified. The don't be afraid was more about you don't need to be concerned about how God will make this real. It is all about be certain God will make it possible. And while the angel did say in Luke 1:30, do not be afraid, this invitation wasn't about being terrified. The don't be afraid was more about you don't need to be concerned about how God will make this real. It was all about be certain God will make it possible. Mary didn't know how God will fulfill his promise, only that God would do it. Mary didn't know how God would fulfill his promise, only that God would do it. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't have a 5-year plan. She didn't have a backup plan. She had a simple sentence. Here I am. Let it be with me according to your word. What that means to us is this. Hope, at least in the Christian sense, starts there. Here I am. Let me be with me according to your word, God. Not with the here's my idea or here is my perfect family Christmas plan. Not with the here is my impressive spiritual life. Not with here is my long list. Let it be according to your will. Consider that in one hand. Now consider this in the other. Matthew's gospel gives something else to consider. Matthew records Jesus talking about watchfulness, but not in a fearful end of times movie way. Jesus is basically saying you can miss God simply by being too distracted. I know a reading from Matthew today might not be your typical Christmas reading, but it's definitely an Advent reading. See, according to Matthew 24, people in Noah's time were not doing anything really bad, really scandalous. They were eating, marrying, going to work, paying bills, blah, 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 blah of life. They were living life. But they lack wasn't morality. It was awareness. Again, according to Matthew 24, people in times of Noah lack awareness. Awareness of the presence of God. Awareness of God's desires. Awareness that the call is to desire less of us and more of God. Jesus tells us to stay awake, to stay vigilant. But many of us feel like we are just barely awake at all this time of year. We're busy, we are exhausted, we are overstimulated, we may be spiritually thirsty or gospel starving. And what we do is either do more or walk away from all of it. See, pay attention to this. It is interesting and vastly uncomfortable. And if we have ears to listen, listen to this. Jesus doesn't blame bad people for missing God. He blames busy people for missing God. People who were so centered in themselves that they stop noticing life and how it spins. If that's not a warning for Advent 2025, I don't know what it is. Every year the world tells us, buy more, rush more, decorate more, appear happy, even if you're not. And all of that noise can drown everything Advent asks of us. Watch for God. And all of that noise can drown out everything that Advent, that this season is asking of us. Watch for God, especially if life is interrupting your plans. So my invitation for you on this first Sunday of Advent is to watch well. But what does that mean? What does that look like? Let me say this. Watching well is not paranoia or hyper spirituality. It is not looking for angels in the cereal aisle or in the fruit aisle. Watching well is private and honestly riskier habit. Watching well means slowing down. But again, this isn't a telenovela. Slowing down is not about saying no to everything in your calendar or canceling all of your plans. It goes beyond that. Watching well means giving yourself permission to say no so that you can say yes to that what actually brings life. It means choosing presence over performance, even if presence looks a little bit ordinary. Watching well often begins with small things. Lingering enough at the kitchen table to hear your child half-finished, made-up story. Driving without the radio just to notice the piece that you didn't think about you had. Or choosing to pray before you react when someone is irritating you. It may also mean saying yes to the quiet nudge of God that you almost ignore. Saying yes to rest before going out. Saying yes to gratitude before you slide into complaint. Saying yes to the person right in front of you instead of pressure of what is next. When Jesus tells us to watch well, he isn't asking for caffeine-fueled perfection. He's inviting us to live alert, to pay attention to what gives life and purpose, to notice the holy hidden in the ordinary, and to trust that God is already at work in ways that we cannot always see because he hasn't been revealed to us. Watching well is not passive. It's a posture of expectation, a heart that believes that God still breaks into our weekends and our crowded schedules with grace. So maybe the invitation this Advent is simple. Don't rush past the moments where God is whispering. Don't miss Emmanuel because the calendar is full. Say no where you need to so that you can say yes to hope, yes to Advent, yes to Christ, yes to wonder, yes to the presence of the one who comes near. Because Nazareth was nobody's first choice. Choice for a divine visitation? No way. Nobody's choice. So watch well in your office, at home, at the grocery store. Not all sightseeings of God happen in holy places. So watch well in your office, at home, next to you, the church pew. These might not feel like the most of holy places, but hope doesn't wait for perfect conditions. God appears in Nazareth, homes, traffic, public parking lots. So let us remember Mary. Mary wasn't ready in the practical sense. She had no plan, no nursery, no savings, but she was watchful. In a spiritual sense, she was attentive, open, available. She watched well. So as we begin this Advent together, may I encourage you gently and honestly to resist the December autopilot. Resist the pressure to have a magazine perfect Christmas. Resist the temptation to buy what your soul actually needs to pray over. Watch well. Watch for God in the conversations you didn't plan, in the interruptions you didn't welcome, and in the quiet moments you almost skipped. Watch like Mary with an open heart. Watch like Jesus teaches with a steady soul. Watch with hope, not fear, and when God whispers to you, because He will, in some way, may you have the grace to say, "Here I am. Here I am." Merry Christmas.